So we now move on to what the AA is about. We are the tripartite. We are the organization that brings together brands, media owners, and agencies in one conversation about our common charge, which is advertising. And so we've got one from each, and I'm going to introduce them in reverse order, all in one go, ask them to come up on the stage, stay here, and then we'll join in Q&A before we go on to the next session. So third up will be Andrew Higginson, chairman of Morrisons, much in the news lately, and I really hope we'll be on the sharp end of his reputation for straight talking this morning. Second up, we hear from Sara Tate, who's the managing director of Mother, one of the big UK agency success stories. And the philosophy at Mother is to make great work, have fun, and make a living. Always in that order. Seems to be working. And first, and the person to whom I'll hand over next is someone I met very recently, and of whom I'm already in great awe, Eileen Naughton, the new managing director of Google here in the UK. As an aside, any of you in the audience who have signed up to or have yet to sign up for the AA's initiative to support speakers for schools through the Advertising Association, check out Eileen's fantastic contribution online. But now we're going to hear her in the flesh. So, Eileen Naughton.
Well, thank you, Tim, and good morning, all. Sincere thanks to the Advertising Association for inviting Google and me to speak about technology-driven trends in marketing and how, as media changes, people will react to communications driven by data. Now, as a relative newcomer to London, I think you can hear my accent. I'd like to thank many of you in the audience whom I've met for welcoming me, a New York transplant, to the UK's very vibrant advertising and marketing community. I must say it is completely energizing to be here, to be working in the UK, which is by every measure an advanced market on every level that I can see. Content, creative, mobile, digital adoption, e-commerce, and even ad tech. And it's pretty clear to me then that the future of advertising is happening here in the UK. It's happening now. And while Google certainly doesn't have all the answers about the future of advertising, as innovators in this space for some time now, we're a little more than 15 years old, we do have very strong views on data, technology, and consumers. And frankly, it all starts with the consumer. Serving the consumer, or what we at Google call the end user, because we are a tech company, as you can see here from Google's founder's IPO letter in 2004, this is at the very core of Google's guiding principles. It is our foremost DNA principle. And for us, the promise of digital marketing has always been to radically improve the consumer experience of advertising, to make it more relevant, to make it more targeted, to make it less intrusive, while helping advertisers find the right consumer at the right time with the right message, and to do so a whole lot more efficiently than ever before. Now, this is the essence of search marketing, which is Google's first and still fundamental, foremost product. It's perhaps the most profound innovation in marketing in the last 50 years. But it's worth noting that data-driven advertising is nothing new. Google didn't invent it. Facebook didn't invent it. Amazon didn't invent it. WPP, OMD, SMG, Aegis didn't invent it. Marketers have been using data to reach consumers for a very, very long time. It's a practice that's as old as human history. This photo shows a carving of a foot next to a woman's torso. It was carved thousands of years ago into a piece of marble, a cobblestone in the ancient Greek city of Ephesus, now on the present-day Turkish coast. To a modern eye, the advert might not be so obvious, but this was an ad for a house of comfort. It was found along a dockside pathway where sailors would disembark from long voyages at sea. This, ladies and gentlemen, is 2,000-year-old targeted marketing. And who here remembers the telephone directory yellow pages? Those bulky books, a crude precursor of search advertising, can you imagine carrying one of those in your pocket these days? These directories likewise used highly personal data, individuals' addresses and phone numbers, to connect consumers with local services and businesses. And then, of course, there are magazines, catalogs, and direct mail. All of these published media use sophisticated data models, regression analyses, and heaps of first and third-party data to tailor content, to qualify audiences, and target ads to specific interests. I ran Time magazine before coming to Google, and Time uses, like many magazine publications, elaborate data models to construct different versions of the magazine in a way that maximizes revenue while minimizing printer waste in the manufacturing process. Data-driven bindery equipment selectively bind, they fire different editorial and ad pages targeted at very specific audience segments. And in any given week at Time, we ran more than 40,000 versions of the magazine. And similarly, TV networks and media agencies use enormous amounts of data to build predictive models, enabling advertisers to target specific ads to different viewers using demo data, set-top box signals, proprietary and third-party data. So this is standard practice, and it's very sophisticated math. So marketing has been data-driven for many, many decades, if not for centuries. But what's different now, at least in an advanced market like the UK, is that consumers' digital behavior and the arrival of ubiquitous internet connectivity make content consumption portable, personal, pervasive, immediate, two-way, and on-demand. And this changes everything. It's given rise to an altogether new challenge for marketers and content creators alike, who must now make sense of billions upon billions of data signals, and I mean billions. And that's not an exaggeration. In any given day, tens of billions, that indicate consumer interest in a specific piece of content, whether that content is a song, a video, a flight schedule, a recipe, or an ad. And these data signals mean that today, for the very first time in mass marketing history, a dynamic two-way conversation, a dialogue exists between a consumer and a marketer. And these data signals do allow marketers now to find the right audience, help them understand how consumers engage with their ads, and really identify consumers who actually are interested, and find an advertisement useful as information that's relevant to them in a given moment, really in a nanosecond. So listening and responding in real time to these signals is now what offers marketers an edge. Done well and done respectfully, it also improves the consumer experience, because consumers respond to marketing messages when they are relevant and they provide utility or some form of information or often entertainment. Google recently worked with a financial institution to gain insights around video watch time and other behavioral signals and target consumers who are most interested in the bank's message, and using those signals to find the right audience at precisely the right moment. The bank saw tens of thousands of consumers spend an extra 30 minutes on their site and visited the site 7 additional times with 10% lower bounce rate. With results like that, it's no surprise that the industry is embracing the one tool that enables dynamic marketing, and that is programmatic buying. Now, programmatic has become something of an industry buzzword, but it is a simple premise. It means using technology to automatically buy and run ad campaigns in real time, reaching the right people with the right message. And while this is understandably good for marketers and eliminates a lot of the waste in the system, it's good for consumers as well. A recent BCG study of 5 large display advertisers found that advanced data-driven techniques drove more engagement and big performance gains, a 32% average decrease in cost per action. But importantly, it improved the consumer experience by targeting ads to a more engaged and receptive audience. And a separate study by Coleman Parks showed that 75% of 20 to 40-year-old people are favorably disposed to brands and companies that customize messaging and make offers personally relevant and remember who they are. But relevant ads are not enough. Consumers do expect now to be in control. Research by the video ad platform eBuzzing showed that while people are willing to skip or avoid online video ads, and they do so on the majority of the cases when they're enabled to do so, the top reason they give for watching a video ad is that it's relevant to me. Now at Google, we offer an ad format called TrueView on YouTube and across our publisher network. TrueView ads give viewers choice and control over which ad message they want to see and when they want to see them. You'll notice in the lower right-hand corner of this photo, on every video ad that appears on YouTube, there's a little button that allows a consumer to advance and skip the ad. And it's remarkable. Advertisers pay Google only when a viewer chooses not to skip the ad. So this will present for 5 seconds. And if the video plays to its entirety or 30 seconds, whichever is longer, the advertiser actually pays Google. More than 85% of in-stream ads on YouTube right now are skippable. This is good for the consumer. On the other hand, the advertiser, while not having to pay for wasted views, saves an enormous amount of its brands and marketers' budgets. This is good for marketers. So as you might imagine, TrueView is the principal ad format used by marketers on YouTube today. Now next, we believe that control is essential to consumer privacy. Google takes its responsibility to privacy very, very seriously. I would actually go so far as to say no other digital platform takes its responsibility to privacy as seriously. Our ads are privacy sensitive, and consumers are always in control. For signed-in users to Google services, account information is and might be used to target more relevant ads. But consumers can control all the information stored in their Google accounts and control the ads they see through our ads setting area. You can just Google ads preferences, ads preference manager, and you come up with this. We're not alone in this. Facebook offers ad preferences manager functionality, as does Amazon, and just about every responsible site does. These ad settings allow users to turn off on Google targeted ads on our properties and across our ad network, meaning the consumer controls the types of ads he or she wants to see and can block specific advertisers from ever showing ads to them in search, on Gmail, or on our content network. And we also give users, consumers, control at the moment they're seeing an ad. We have a reasonably newer function called a mute this ad feature on most of our display ads. Muting an ad blocks it and other ads that use the same URL from ever being shown in the future. And we're happy to see that this is starting to take on and slowly becoming an industry standard. But digital platforms are not alone in helping consumers take control of what they're seeing online. There is a real need for education and ongoing disclosure on this to consumers. Your Online Choices, shown here, is an online tool created by the European Interactive Digital Advertising Alliance. It reveals all the companies that collect and use a consumer's online data to target online advertising. And it gives individuals control over which companies can advertise to them, allowing consumers to manage their digital identity, or what the hip-hop star will.i.am calls #identity. In fact, last week at Davos, tweeting on this very topic from the World Economic Forum, will.i.am said, "I am what I search, I am where I go, I am where I am who I know, I am what I do, I am what I know, #identity." And earlier this week, Ed Vaizey said he's going to use that term every day from now until 98 days from now in the new election. Now, Google fundamentally believes that there is no privacy without security. We use cookies or similar anonymous identifiers to help us protect our services and our consumers from fraud and deliver more relevant advertising at the same time. We believe that bad ads can ruin people's experience and erode their trust in online advertising. So Google works hard to get bad ads and spam off our network. In 2013, which is the most recent data we have right now, we removed more than 350 million bad ads from our system. And we disabled more than 270,000 advertisers for policy violations. And it's because Google operates on the belief that more access to information means more choice, more power, more economic opportunity, and more freedom for people. We believe that the ad-supported web fuels discovery, collaboration, and creativity online for everyone. To that end, we've chosen to offer billions of consumers free ad-supported services. That's our model. That's our value proposition to consumers. Search, YouTube, Gmail, Chrome, Maps, Google+, Translate. These services are free for everyone, even those who choose never to click on an ad. Now, I believe most of us in this room would agree that advertising is good for consumers, good for business, good for the UK economy. It stimulates growth across all sectors. It informs people and helps them discover new things. And it helps companies find new consumers and maintain brand loyalty. And just last week, the UK government published a report laying out its vision for the EU's digital economy. And the report calls for the fostering of a single digital market, a move, it says, that will improve productivity and economic growth, create safe and affordable public services, and increase confidence in doing business online. And I quote, "Data fuels creativity and innovation. We must make sure that anonymized data is available to be used." So it is the responsibility of all of this in this industry to ensure a safe, healthy, and responsible advertising sector, one that respects consumers' privacy and media consumption habits, one that earns advertisers' trust in our media and in the means by which their agencies plan and purchase media. We are fortunate in the UK to have an ad industry that takes this responsibility to consumers and to society very seriously. That's why our industry maintains a gold standard system of advertising self-regulation. But if we are to maintain the UK's position at the forefront of digital advertising innovation, and I can assure you, coming from the US market, that the UK is Google's most advanced advertising market by a long shot. We must constantly challenge ourselves and the regulatory system in place to keep a consumer-centric, common-sense approach to governance of these new tools of advertising production. On behalf of Google, I welcome the chance to work with the Advertising Association and other industry groups to ensure our regulatory system remains the gold standard for the new data-driven digital age. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Hello. As they said in the introduction, I'm managing director for a creative agency called Mother. We produce advertising for lots of brands that you guys will have seen, so household names like Boots, IKEA, Halfords. Some people ask why we're called Mother. One of the reasons is if you were to come into our office, I know there's a couple of our clients here today, you'll see pictures of our mums up on the wall. That my mum is in the middle there in a kind of fetching sort of 60s bikini. She wouldn't appreciate a close-up in front of this many people. And part of the reason that we have those pictures there is to remind us of the people who consume our work and the world that it goes out into, to kind of pull our heads out of our advertising bubble a little bit. So as a representative from a creative agency, I've been asked to talk today about what this kind of changing landscape means for the work. How can advertising stay relevant, accepted, and hopefully welcomed in people's lives? And, talk about the tension, if there is one, between creativity and ethics, and the role that creativity plays above and beyond kind of channels and media and messaging, which Eileen's already talked about. I also realized on the way here, I was probably expected to come and sort of press play on some interesting, exciting, fun case studies of ethical, green, social, crowd-funded, saving the rainforest, ethical with a big E type work, and tell you it's all going to be fine. But given that it is a talk about the ethics, I thought I'd do something not expected of an ad man or ad woman and actually tell the truth. And talk about something which we discuss quite a lot in our agency, and what we feel is a risk and is a massive challenge that this sector of the creative industries is facing. So it's not news to anyone that the current deal is changing. Everyone knows this. Part of that deal with consumers was always that advertisers and brands would fund their content, and they would pay to buy their attention and interrupt that TV content largely based on programming. But that deal's changing. We see consumers, content funding in many other areas that is not interrupted by commercials. It is no longer a broadcast-led world for advertisers. And the Golden Globes this year really played that out. Don't know if anyone has enjoyed this show or many others. Basically, Amazon and Netflix, those digital content creators, ad-free subscription models, won more Golden Globes than the regular commercial cable outlets for the first time. So it's not news to anyone that things are changing. So most of our clients, we are now having conversations with them about new forms of creativity. They're moving towards less TV-based interruption, less broadcast, more content platforms and services. It's getting more complicated. Within the old landscape, that broadcast TV led, the benefits of creativity were very well understood by everyone. Bill Bernbach, this quote's from like 1952, I think. He said that it's one of the grandfathers of advertising. Creativity may well be the last legal, unfair competitive advantage. And I think some of the quotes that Richard said certainly suggest that it is unfair. But the business benefit for brands and businesses was well known, and it's been well written about. As Binet and Field have done loads of statistical analysis that shows that work that connects emotionally, that drives fame, can also drive sales and share. Same work done for correlation between awards wins and sales, between emotional connection and sales. So, in the TV world, in theory, it shouldn't have been a zero-sum game. The more consumers enjoyed ads, the more they engaged with them, the better it was for business. But it's all changed. It's getting more complicated. And if I'm being honest, I think there is a risk, a danger, that within the new landscape, we start to overlook the value that creativity can add for brands and businesses, but also critically the role that it therefore plays for consumers as part of this deal. And I think there's a couple of reasons why. There's many, many reasons why. I'm just going to touch on a couple. Eileen has talked about the enormous excitement behind big data, about essentially being able to find the right people at the right time in the purchase cycle and deliver them exactly the right message, to minimize the wastage, etc. There is a risk within that we become so excited by focusing on, sorry, can I go back one? Sorry. Thank you. That we become so excited by these new forms of access that we actually overlook the role that ideas plays in that. That we're so excited by the fact that we can reach consumers beyond the traditional ad break, that we can pop up on their doormat, in their newsfeed while they're sitting on the bus reading Facebook, that we actually kind of overlook what we're going to do as a brand, how we're going to behave once we get there. There used to be an analogy that people would say in the TV days, which was they would liken a TV ad sort of interrupting when you're sitting down and watching curry with your family, having a takeaway. A TV ad popping up in that, would liken it to a brand just wandering into your living room. And they would say, if you're going to do that, you better damn well make sure that once you get in there and interrupt that lovely family having an evening, that you are interesting and you are charismatic and you are smart and you are well-dressed. And I don't think it is enough just to be telling them a useful, relevant message. But there is a risk that now we're just so damn excited that we don't just walk through the door, that we can come down their chimney and pop out from behind the curtain and sit next to them on the bus and kind of pop up on their phone, that we are overlooking the creative idea that will guide our behavior and make us welcomed when we get there. Another impact, I think, the rise of data and measurable technology, and absolutely, the advance of data is a wonderful thing for brands, but it does play to a very human desire to analyze and understand and ultimately kind of control marketing, to make it a science rather than an art, although clearly the head of the RSA would think that's a heretical thing for me to say. And I think that sometimes, rather than embracing the very real new creative opportunities that channels offer, we do try and make it a science rather than an art, because, there is a part of our left brain that really wants to do that. Very cheap, quick, quantitative testing. You can now turn around a test or a piece of content in 24 hours. When I started in the industry like 15 years ago, you'd be waiting 3 weeks for a researcher to come back with a plan. The rise of very quick testing is leading to homogenized content. It's true, it's removing the risk factor, and it's removing, the greatness at the top and the real shit at the bottom. But there's a lot of stuff being written at the minute that content is becoming quite homogenized. Also, the constant measurement that digital channels brings us, views, likes, reaches, can lead to, doesn't have to, but can lead to a focus on quantity over quality and, allowing the left brain to win out over the right. And, I would go as far to say that if brands start to overlook the need for creativity for their own benefit, then I think we really do so at the industry's peril. Great creativity, we believe at Mother, is really still key to the deal with consumers. Figures say different things, but they reckon we're exposed to about 5,000 messages every day from an industry with £20 billion worth of commercial activity. People don't just want to endure these messages. They should be right, they should be relevant. But is that it, really? Is that like the best we can do? If you want people to actually want to enjoy engaging with the things that marketing produces, new channels do offer us loads of ways to demonstrate creativity that broadcast didn't. We can be useful, can be inspiring, we should at minimum be well-designed and well-crafted and not kind of look like shit. We should be entertaining, we can be innovative. And yes, I think we can, and there is a risk that we can reduce it to a very efficiently delivered messaging matrix. But once we do, that deal we have with consumers will be broken. The joy, the magic, and the art will be squeezed out. My mum, she does know I don't play piano in the brothel. She's a GP, so is my sister, so is my dad in the NHS. I chose to come into advertising because as a kid, I liked it, I enjoyed, I got value from it. I enjoyed engaging with the things that it produced, and my family are not ashamed that I've chosen this to do as a career because they, as consumers, see that value. I do also believe that the industry should aim much higher than legal, decent, honest, and true. That is a hygiene factor. We have to be doing better than that. With that massive volume, those 5,000 messages a day that are put out into the world, advertising, whether the guy from the RSA likes it or not, is still a very powerful form of popular culture. It takes different forms now. Sometimes it is, a classic character-driven campaign, a popular Alan Monkey that consumers love to engage with and talk to on Facebook a lot. Sometimes it's a massive viral meme like the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, which I'm sure no one will have escaped seeing in the summertime. Sometimes it's an Instagram feed, Jamie Oliver's Instagram feed, 2.4 million followers, just beautiful, nicely curated shots that many people just enjoy interacting with and kind of learning about food through. And if we reduce it to just an efficiently delivered messaging matrix, I think we do overlook, at risk of sounding naive, a huge positive cultural contribution that we should demand that marketing makes. I talked to someone at work about this. I was like, for me, it's like reducing Hollywood or the BBC to just a series of kind of public information films. And I think whilst marketing remains a part of our landscape, we have a responsibility to still drive to make it creatively brilliant and still employ creativity and not just rely on the efficiency that big data can give us. We should look for it to entertain, inspire, create awe, wonder, amuse, to bring new stimulus to the landscape of which it is part. I worked out the other day, I've got a daughter, she's 6 months old. She will spend more hours consuming media and marketing messages than she will in mainstream schooling. And I want those things to be more than just ethical and efficient. I want them to be what I know they can be, which is also appealing to the right brain and bringing a bit of creativity, of joy, of kind of flair. I want them to not just be a necessary evil that she has to engage with because we have proven that it grows the economy. I think that's a really low bar to set ourselves. And actually, rather than a tension between creativity and ethics, I think embracing the added cultural value that creativity adds is actually really key to doing the right thing, and we do walk away from it at our peril. If we don't aim high for this section of the creative industries, the standing will fall. Of course it will. The talent will drain, the investment will drain, consumers' love will definitely drain, and the level of engagement with brands. And it will be a race to the bottom. It will be high volume and low cost. Bill Bernbach also said in the 1950s, he said a quote which was, "I want to show people that good taste and good art can be good selling." And I think it's actually the other way now. I think we need to remind ourselves and prove again that good selling can still be good taste and good art. And no, it doesn't have to be, but I think we'll be a lot the poorer if it's not. That's hard though. Like, you know, how do we do what's right? How do we do what's great? So don't cross the ethical line. Be responsible, but how do you do what's great, enriches and enhances the landscape it goes out into? When we're faced with new channels, we've got much greater volume of work than before. Everyone is under greater pressure, economic and time-wise. We work at a greater speed than ever before. A recent global campaign for Stella, we used to do campaigns for Stella, and a global campaign, we'd make like one TV ad and a couple of ad apps. We did a recent global campaign, and we produced over 1,200 separate pieces of content over 3 months. I mean, even just getting that stuff made is hard enough without making sure that it's right and that it's brilliant. That all sounds a bit Cassandra-like and kind of a bit doom and gloom, but I think there is, and I think Richard touched on it actually, there is a way that we can really help ourselves and that any company can start to navigate this. We have an incredibly sophisticated secret weapon that is able to evolve quicker than the landscape around us. It will always be even more sensitive to what is right than even the fastest changing form of regulation. And it will be a litmus test for what surprises, what can delight, what's really great and worth putting out into the world. And that secret weapon is the people within our organizations. You know, Richard said he hasn't met anyone within this industry that doesn't have an effective working conscience. Those people are very few and far between. You know, the people who work in this industry, they know what's right and acceptable, ultimately. We are mums and dads and brothers and sisters and husbands and wives. They also know what's good or great. Not everyone can create it, but they can judge it. They can have a bloody good go at judging it. We are all consumers, you know, everyone in this room, and we are able to assess what's worthy of your own time and attention. What is worth being put out into that landscape that you really think is worth dealing with? And I do agree with Richard that individuals are much more likely to make the right decisions than institutions are. And if we want to try and do what's right and what's great more often, we need to try and encourage that, to try and create cultures that encourage people to apply their own moral and ethical judgment rather than abdicate responsibilities. You know, we've all seen wonderful kind of clangers on social media, an automotive client recently asking people to give a like on Facebook related to an improvement in Michael Schumacher's medical, dire situation, being in a coma. And immediately everyone was up in arms going, it's obviously, really crossing a boundary, asking people to actively engage in a piece of marketing activity related to someone being incredibly sick. We all know that. If the person doing that had actually been able to stop and ask themselves whether or not they really thought that was the right thing to do, they probably, their own moral compass would have said no. We also, this is even more alien for us, I think, try and create cultures that encourage people to exercise their own taste. It's very right-brain stuff, exercise their own taste rather than just follow a set of guidelines. So cultures that encourage that right-brain thinking, that encourage emotional response to work, that encourage some subjectivity. I hear people ask a lot, does it work? And it has to work. But I don't hear people ask, is it great enough? Is this really great? Would I really put it out there? Am I proud of this? We won't be able to develop processes or procedures or rule books fast enough to keep up, although organizations like the AA obviously are right to examine these things. But I do think we need to turn to what will always be the most sophisticated, nuanced, intuitive resource ever invented, which is our talent and our people. And I'm lucky enough to work in a culture that tries its best to do that, tries to encourage individual responsibility, which, in truth, is the real reason that we have these women on our wall, is because at bare minimum, we want to be able to ask ourselves regularly, every day, is this something genuinely that my mother would be proud of? Thank you.
Blimey. That's my slide. I feel a bit out of my depth here. I'm now the chairman, and no one really knows what chairmen do, least of all me. But I used to be the finance director, and so when they asked me to come and speak to the Advertising Association, I found it impossible to refuse because it seemed so impossibly glamorous. And now I'm standing here, and I've got no slides. And no tweed, no crazy colours. I'm feeling very nervous, so forgive me. They asked me to come and talk about a really interesting topic, the board perspective on governance and ethics. So here we go. I suppose good boards, which are really made up of teams, and bad boards, are quite often differentiated by only one person, actually. And it's very interesting to observe my industry, which I left Tesco at the end of 2011, and I've come back to Morrisons just last week, really. And in between, I was with Poundland, which has done a business that's done very well and IPO'd this year. And it's been very interesting to sort of look back and observe this industry that I've been part of for a very long time. And when we heard from Richard earlier about Friedman versus Pullman, I suppose, profit versus ethics, and shareholders and so on, the ethical versus the pragmatic, I agree it's not ethical or pragmatic, it is ethical and pragmatic. And it's not a binary decision, one or the other. In my industry, retail, the recession's seen a very visible struggle at the boards, one that, as I say, I've watched with some dismay, really, when I've seen the demise of Tesco and indeed Morrisons is in some difficulty at the moment, where the boards have been wrangling with this issue of do we drive shareholder value absent a growth in consumer spending through this very long recession that we've gone through. Driving shareholder value is one of those things that keeps non-exec directors awake at night. Of course, in the case of executives who are running the business, they're always looking and seeking permission to keep going. In the case of retail, opening stores when there was obviously no growth really in consumer spending. So driving shareholder value, whatever that means, became a kind of mythical thing that people started to chase. And unfortunately chose over what they should be doing, which is chasing customers. Now, in my view, in my terms, that's a dishonest discussion that's gone on around the board table. Somehow the numbers are favoured. Well, first of all, somehow the numbers are viewed independently of customers. And I think really in my game, if you like, the supermarket game, what keeps businesses honest, really, is keep following customers. And of course, it's competition. And if you don't have competition in certain markets, it might be regulation, and we'll perhaps touch on that as well, because I was asked to touch on that. And there's a big difference between the two. But it is following customers that keeps businesses honest. And of course, because customers collectively make up society, that's how you keep in tune with changing trends. In my experience, all businesses talk about customers. Very few truly live the talk. All public companies, of course, have to deliver for shareholders. And you might find this a bit strange for me to say, but too often the accountants win. The recession in the supermarket game, as I say, saw some businesses stick to their knitting, carrying on investing in customers, carrying on doing what they were good at. Whereas some, as I say, turn to this mantra of improving returns. And if you like to distinguish those, the discounters stuck to their knitting and the supermarkets tried to improve their returns. It's really a failure of management, really. It was the wrong choices that were made. And a bit of a lack of honesty with themselves, as I say, with shareholders in a sense, pretending that they could carry on growing returns through that recession. But most of all with customers. And the thing I've learned through life is that the overwhelming conclusion I've come to in a way is that competition is the best regulator. If customers have a genuine choice, they can vote with their feet. And for years, Tesco argued that in the face of regulators who were trying to say that Tesco was dominant in the marketplace. Our argument was always that if we didn't do a good job for customers, they could go 5 minutes down the road and shop somewhere else. And as we can now see, we were right. They did. They went to Poundland, they went to B&M, they went to Aldi, they went to Home Bargains, they went to Lidl. But they also went to John Lewis, they went to Waitrose, to those retailers really who stuck to their knitting and listened to their customers and served them well. And the competition, which allowed customers choice, that competition, which allowed those customers choice, didn't force them into higher prices in a recession in an attempt by business to look after shareholders. Competition is a good thing, and customers voted with their feet. So it's why Tesco was a success in the first place, and in a way, why it tripped up. The team that I was lucky enough to be on from the mid-90s through to certainly the mid-noughties was the best team I've ever been on, whether that's in business, in sport, in anything else really. I joined in 97 and we'd just overtaken Sainsbury's to become the #1 in the UK. And today, of course, we're more than twice the size, or Tesco, not we, the Tesco are more than twice the size of Sainsbury's here in the UK alone. But the reason for that success wasn't scale or strength or financial muscle. It was innovating for customers. If you think about it, Tesco was first into 24-hour opening, they were into extras where everything was under one roof. If that wasn't, having everything under one roof wasn't convenient enough, we opened convenience stores down the end of your street. If that wasn't convenient enough, we'd do home delivery through the internet. We had Clubcard and all the data and analysis that brought us. We had one in front in terms of queues, finest, value, free-from ranges, you name it. There was a long, long list of innovation. And before anyone jumps up and says, well, of course, you've laid down problems for the future because big space is now a problem or supermarkets are dead, no one says John Lewis are suffering from having big space. Or Waitrose, Aldi, Lidl, all supermarkets they're no good. It's actually what you put in the stores. It's how you listen to your customers and respond to them that makes the difference. And if you want another example of customer-led innovation, I've also had the great privilege of being a non-executive director of Sky. And that's often targeted by regulators as being dominant too. I think the remarkable thing about Sky is that when I grew up, first with 2 channels, then 3 channels when BBC 2 came, then 4, then 5 sort of thing, TV was free. And what Sky's remarkable thing is that they have persuaded customers, 10.5 million households in fact, to pay for something that was traditionally free. No one forced those customers to take Sky. They chose to pay. And before you say, well, it's because they got all the sport, in fact, less than half the customers, I think, subscribe for the sports channels. They've become the second biggest in broadband after BT. And whilst BT are now fighting back, whether that's customer-led or to defend their broadband position doesn't matter. I think it's all examples of where competition in competitive markets do a great job for customers. And I have to confess, even though I was on the Sky board, I do think that TV today is a lot better than it was when we had 2 channels. So innovating for customers is really the only way to win. Being a me too really is no good. I always had a sort of fear of benchmarking, because when you benchmark the leader, I've always had this view that by the time you've implemented the 2-year plan to get to where they were, they've moved on. And so benchmarking for me is always a reason to come second. I think the internet is, of course, having a profound effect in the retail space. In a sense, it delivers perfect transparency to customers. But funnily enough, certainly in the supermarket industry, I think the biggest impact has been that it's delivered perfect transparency to business. And in this kind of nuclear arms race to try and be cheaper than your competition or demonstrate that you're cheaper than your competition, in certain markets, the most obvious ones being CDs and DVDs and so on, They've competed away the margin from retailers. And that's happening too when you're selling other brands. I mean, the electrical retailers selling Sony TVs or whatever. Basically, a Sony TV is the same wherever you buy it. So what's the retailer for? You know, and the margin is being eroded there. And in a sense, they're becoming the wholesalers of old. You know, 40 years ago, the wholesale market went through a huge transformation as their margins were competed away and retailers went direct to suppliers. Being the middleman's not a lot of fun in these situations. And I kind of like it a bit to rock and roll because I'm an accountant, and that's a much more interesting analogy than accounts. But you know, in the old days, bands used to make money off albums and do loss-making tours to promote the album, and they made a lot of money off the albums. That obviously opened the doors, in some cases, for talentless bands to create an album with session musicians and make a fortune. But today, that isn't the case. You really make no money off the album today. You make the money touring. And I always think that's kind of the sort of justice in that, isn't there? Because, you know, if you're going to tour the world and play live to millions in that tour, it needs talent and hard work, and you're being rewarded, and that somehow feels right, doesn't it? Particularly in the world of rock and roll, funnily enough. And I think the internet has done that within retailing. You know, if you've got the talent and you design product, if you're Ralph Lauren and you originate all this product, the only way you can buy Ralph Lauren is from someone Ralph says you can buy it from. And also, I think it rewards degree of difficulty. Funnily enough, although the UK's got a very well-developed internet home shopping market, it is still relatively small. We're probably the most developed internet home shopping market in grocery retailing in the world. But it is still pretty small. And so you are being rewarded, in a sense, for the degree of difficulty that comes with moving fresh produce and fresh products through a supply chain in the way that we do. And in a sort of funny sort of way, that's made businesses honest again, hasn't it? You know, it is right that you get rewarded for creating things and for degrees of difficulty. It does bring lots of benefits, though, as well. For a lot of businesses in retail, it's lowered barriers to entry. And, of course, it's opened international markets. You see ASOS and people like that. It's opened international markets without the capital costs that were traditionally associated with opening a lot of space. So it's had quite a profound effect, really. And I think what's, as I say, keep coming back to this mantra, but to win in these competitive markets needs honesty. I don't mean honesty as in nicking the money. I mean, but being truthful and frank with yourself. And if you're not honest with yourself, you know, what are you doing, really? I think honesty with customers, you know, I've looked at the advertising in supermarkets over the last 4 years, and they all seem to be talking to each other. They're not talking to customers. They're talking to each other about how we're cheaper than you, yeah. And, you know, if you believe the ads, and, you know, we're talking about ethics, every one of the big four is cheaper than all the others. And I don't know how that works, really. I'm an accountant, I can't quite work that out. But anyway, apparently, of course, the irony is that none of them are that cheap, which is why Aldi, Lidl, B&M, and all those other guys that I mentioned are doing better. And you see this dishonesty and this kind of confusion all the time. I went into my local Express store the other day to buy a bottle of wine. Perfectly nice bottle of inexpensive £6 bottle of Chardonnay, New World Chardonnay. It was very nice. I know a bit about wine. It was a £6 bottle of wine every day of the week. Perfectly happy to pay £6 for that. But it was advertised as being £12, 50% off, reduced to £6. That was never a £12 bottle of wine in my life, I promise you. It was never a £12 bottle. Now, I'm sure that somewhere they put it on a shelf and dusted the shelf for a couple of weeks while they retained a price of £12 somewhere. But that was never a £12 bottle of wine. They were just kidding me. And I resent that as a customer. And this is bloody accountants again, chasing numbers, you know, trying to sort of prove the unprovable, really. And you see it all the time as you go around supermarkets now. You know, you see weak promotions that are really funded by suppliers, actually. They're not really what customers want. You know, people ignoring customer feedback all the time. They're allowing the competitors to thrive. The discounters didn't really get any cheaper. They just stuck to what they do. It was the supermarkets all got more expensive, and that's where the price gap came and gave the discounters the oxygen of price advantage. I think the worst thing that people do is fit evidence to the conclusion they've already come to. And you saw that with Richard talking about the tobacco industry and how they used to sort of delude themselves that actually it was all okay. And, you know, that is a problem. You see that all the time in supermarkets. Where they've, you know, I had a very surreal discussion when I first went into Morrisons where they were saying we've got to take out freshly baked donuts from the store because factory-based ones come out better in taste tests with customers. I said, well, there's never in a million years that a freshly baked donut that's just been baked 2 minutes from where you stood is ever going to taste worse than a factory-based donut that's been in the supply chain for 2 days. But they'd managed to come up with some evidence that proved it, and they were about to take, you know, fresh donuts out of the stores, which we stopped. So there's all this fitting evidence. It's this kind of lack of honesty, really, as you try and drive for shareholder returns and don't follow customers. I just wanted to touch very briefly on the ethics of data. We had Club Card, we had dunnhumby. We use that to understand customers. Loyalty cards not make you more loyal, but the information that comes from it is absolutely fantastic. You know, we would be able to send customers vouchers that they actually wanted, and we get over 30% redemption typically, which is pretty high. We would always think of it very ethically. We would try and anonymize the groups of customers so you weren't talking about individuals. You know, where it started to get a bit more tricky was, you know, do you start to, because Tesco sold car insurance, financial services and all sorts of things. If you see a customer regularly buying Red Bull at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, do you put their car premiums up? And I think we struggle with that. That was kind of tricky. Fortunately, the EU have stepped in, and so you can imagine how customer focused this is going to be. They've now ruled out low premiums for women drivers. You probably saw that. You know, people like Sheila's Wheels, a bit of a bugger for their system, I tell you. Their proposition went straight down the toilet. But because, of course, it's discriminatory and sexist. You know, the immediate question that sprang to mind, you know, was where did this idea emerge that women are safer drivers? Oh, a bit of silence there. A few bit of liberals in the room. What's he going to say? I can tell. I mean, we all know. No, come on, calm down. We're not having one of these 1980s kind of hindsight moments. We all know that men are magnificent drivers. Knights of the road, always courteous, calm, never need to ask for directions. So why should they pay more for their car insurance? It's a fair point. Now, what Club Card told us, of course, is that it isn't women or men. It's really people who do local trips versus people who do long trips. And it just happens that statistically more women do local trips than more men do long trips. And that's where that sort of myth came from. So the EU are actually quite right. You shouldn't differentiate purely on those kind of grounds. But the data gave us the insight to be able to differentiate slightly better. How did we apply the ethical filter? Well, we kind of worked on the principle that our customers were so valuable to us that if we you know, the information and the data that came from Club Bar was so valuable, you know, we could never ever abuse that relationship. Otherwise, we would lose the trust of the customers on it. So we've never sold a name. We, you know, never wanted a story that said Tesco abuses customer data. So in a sense, it was much the same of trying to follow your customers, trying to understand your customers. I've got to move on, I think, because I've run out of time. But I was going to talk a little bit about competition, because where competition doesn't exist, of course, people turn to regulators. And there you get some very strange things. And I know you've got a debate at the moment between self-regulation and another regulation. And I can tell you that having worked in financial services a little bit, regulation is a nightmare. As well-intended as it often is, and as important as it is, I mean, if you think about financial services, goodness knows we needed more prudential regulation anyway. Nevertheless, the law of unintended consequences dominates in that market. And so if you can make the self-regulatory thing work, then I would certainly encourage you to do that. So the only conclusion I come to is that in this ethical debate, the best way to go is to trust your customers. It's quite right to protect customers, but I would say let them choose, let customers choose. There's a certain condescension towards customers amongst many commentators, particularly journalists and politicians. You know, they know how customers should best lead their lives, and that's not great either. So I think be informed by regulators, be informed by commentators, but listen to your customers, and broadly speaking, you'll be okay. You know, so many people can't wait to tell you how to live your lives, but that isn't the right way to go to. Customers and competition keep you honest at the board level, and if not, the regulators will, and you really don't want that. So, in my view, follow the customers, not the numbers, because at the end of the day, the numbers come from whether you've got satisfied customers. You get rewarded for innovation, and the role of enterprise is not either or in terms of ethics and so on, as we discussed earlier. You know, the role of enterprise is not to fix society's ills. But if you don't reflect society, if you don't reflect the norms, what's acceptable, then you'll do a poor job for customers and you'll lose your business. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed, all three of you. The first three all managed to get brothled into, or in one way or another, into your presentations, which was quite good and quite relevant to advertise. Can we have the house lights up, please? Because we've got a few minutes, I think. I'm getting a countdown here for some questions. I've got some on the screen, and to try. And we've got roving mics, and so put a hand up if you haven't sent in a question, but you've got something burning you want to say, or shout or scream, or try to attract my attention. Here's one. I'll just chuck this into all of them. If competition is the best regulator, can we ever have too much advertising? Richard.
I think some of the evidence from those AA numbers that I quoted was that one of the reasons that people were getting, had a sort of declining favourability towards advertising was there was just so much of it. And of course there is so much more of it. There's so much more stuff that is being funded by advertising now. So yeah, we can have too much advertising.
Yeah, I think okay. Yeah, sorry, Ian's coming down there. I thought he was coming to ask a question. Lindsay has tweeted, Lindsay Clay has actually said, should we be educating, maybe this is one for you, Eileen, should we be educating people that ads can and should be skipped? Should we be educating people?
Absolutely. It is in long term the consumer's interest to be able to control their environment when they're consuming content. And to me, there's nothing more offensive than logging onto a news site and being forced to watch a 60-second ad for an auto that I'm not going to buy. I have one. If I'm in the market and I'm interested in an Audi, and somehow Audi finds me because they know I'm interested in an A6, I might engage with that ad. Or if it's a piece of content that's genuinely interesting, entertaining, provokes an emotion, or is in the zeitgeist, I might choose to watch it out of interest. But when I'm pervasively hit with ads, I avoid those sites.
Yeah. You just stay off the site.
But there's an issue there, isn't there? Because one of the great things that advertising does is it tells you about stuff you don't know, and it introduces you to a brand that you've never heard of. So if the technology is kind of metering those out, then that kind of diminishes the role of advertising and actually its usefulness for brands.
I fully agree. To meter them out intentionally and always is probably inappropriate. And I discover a lot of new information from brands in my Facebook news feed, on my G+ feed. There's interesting stuff being presented in useful, contextually relevant ways. When it's respecting my consumption pattern and it's not interrupting me, but allowing me to choose to engage, I'm fine with it being there.
Yeah, I think it's good all round, isn't it? Because if you give the customers the choice, it puts the pressure on the advertiser to be better.
And have great creative.
Exactly. If you can engage the customer and get them to watch that by choice, that's so much more powerful than forcing them to do it. And it's a bit like I was trying to make the point within supermarkets. A lot of these supplier-funded promotions, it makes the supplier lazy too, because they're putting crap versions of tertiary brands on good promotional ends, and guess what? They don't sell. And it's because actually the customers don't want them. So that's encouraging them to create crap versions of tertiary brands when really they ought to be working on producing really good versions of good brands.
I was going to say the same applies for creativity. The belief that it's okay as long as we know that message is relevant and being delivered in a contextually appropriate way is enough, and therefore you can just create a crap piece of content and house that message within it. And that that is similarly lazy and not valued and not welcomed.
Oh, we haven't got time for it today, but it's a long time since I worked in agencies. But the notion of now having to create ads that recognise that because the business of skipping ads is actually quite a sophisticated business. And if you're on game sites, you know how to do it. Is how to encourage people to stay with that ad.
Do you know what I would love to say? That we spend our time trying to work our way around what is valid technology that's put in to help people skip things they don't want to watch. We don't, of course we don't. We're much better, rather than saying, how can we trick someone in the first 5 seconds to watching something which isn't relevant for them? We're much better putting our time into creating a spot, so just made a spot for Money Supermarket, man, huge bum, shaking it down the street, which has got a million organic views.
Pretty funny, actually.
1 million organic views in 2 weeks. Organic views means people have chosen to go and seek that out, not paid for views. They've gone on YouTube and they've selected to watch it. And that, for us, is a win. Making a piece of content that someone sees, someone tells someone else about. It's fun, it's funny, you know, and people want to go and choose to look at it rather than try and be tricksy and spend our time trying to get round what is an absolutely valid way of helping people admit the things that aren't right for them.
Yeah. Eileen, there's a famous actor you're aware in, Michael Caine's catchphrase is, not a lot of people know that. And some of the things you were putting up there saying, Google has this great standard and this is what people can do. And so does Facebook, and so does Amazon, etc. And you all do have immense, you know, and all of the implication is that the standard of the best operating companies is immensely high. But there's no common brand out there informing the customer that they exist only to regulate. I mean, you're doing it through your own brands. Do you see, particularly with the major sites like yourself, the need for something like the ASA, but the ASA is in the middle?
Consumer advocacy, public service, information that helps people have a responsible engagement with their digital media consumption. Yes, I agree. It's a useful public service, and it goes beyond an individual media owner or digital platform's responsibility. Yeah. But we all have a big responsibility there to play.
Yeah. Okay. Now we've also got a lawyer in the room. I'm sorry, not just an accountant. We've got a lawyer. Brinsley Dresden is extremely well known in this industry, and he's asked this question: given 727 people unsuccessfully complained to the ASA about the Sainsbury's Christmas ad, do we need to fight against growing claims of particular groups for a right not to be offended by advertising?
What the hell does that mean?
Yeah. Brinsley? Yeah, I mean, Brinsley has also waged quite a personal war against American Apparel, and I think it's kind of been found to be right. But what does it mean, Brinsley?
Well, there do seem to be, I mean, Richard cited that example of the Sainsbury's ad. So Richard cited the example of the Sainsbury's ad right at the beginning, and you know, in the post-Charlie Hebdo world, they've been asking in the context of advertising, do we need to stop pandering to people saying, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that, I find this particular kind of advertising offensive or this creative treatment? And do we need to be more aggressive in pushing back and saying, you know what, if you don't like it, don't watch it. If you don't like that poster ad, don't look at it. I think we've been too sensitive to perceptions of people's concerns when actually we should be a bit more vigorous in defending our freedom to advertise in the way we want.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think having the medium by which people can let us know that they really didn't like something remains vital. And I think the response of the ASA in refusing to ban the commercial was absolutely right. I think we're just doing what you suggested.
And I'm going to give you all one go on Trace's question. I'm sorry for all of you who have suddenly got a rush of questions. And Trace's final one just does it. You all got one short answer on this, and then we've got to get off the stage. Why is it so hard to put the customer first in practice? Andrew, do you want to start with that?
Me? So, well, short answer would be, first of all, it's quite hard to discern what customers want. If it was dead easy, everyone would do it. And then secondly, there are these competing demands. You know, how do you put the customer first and still make money? And you know, sometimes that's a difficult one to face into, and the trick is to do both.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably becoming deeply unfashionable to sort of express your personal views in a professional context. The industry is populated by people, and I think that's the best way of understanding what people on the outside want. It is difficult, and I think as businesses increasingly try and regulate to do the right thing and ask people to kind of adhere to whatever the brand or the business wants and abdicate their own judgment, it does get harder to really judge what people on the receiving end will want and how they will react.
Mm-hmm. Richard?
Well, customer loyalty to any given brand can be fleeting if the customer's not respected. And there's so much competition for individuals' time that no sane brand can avoid having a customer-centric view of its business.
Much overused term, customer loyalty, isn't it? An assumption in there. Richard?
I think that the relationship between customers and brands is fairly sophisticated. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that customers expect brands to do whatever it is they want. Yeah. You know, they understand that there's an economy that the brand has to respect. Yeah. So I think that the brand has to be shown that it's listening and be available, and you know, if somebody tweets about it, they need to respond. And I think that is probably as close to, you know, serving the customer as best as you possibly can as we can reasonably get to. And I think customers probably will accept that.
Okay, thank you. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to thank our first 4 speakers who have been utterly brilliant. Before I do, I'm going to introduce the next session because I'm now out of time according to the clock. And I'm going to ask Sara to come up with her panel. Something to say here, which some of you know, but few of you actually experience, is the effort and time that volunteers put into the Advertising Association. Myself and the team, we're paid. We actually go to work and we get something at the end of the month. But people like Sara and Andy, who are your other 2 folks running the platform, put a huge amount of effort in on behalf of advertising and on behalf of the association. Scylla's going to introduce her panel, but I'd like to thank our 4 great speakers. Welcome Scylla, who's going to take on the next lecture.